I'm glad you're here. At 3 o'clock in the morning on the farm, I was jolted awake by a noise. And when I looked out the window, I saw my daughter-in-law burying something in my yard with a flashlight. When she left, I dug it up and nearly fainted when I saw what it was. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. That night, the silence of my farm was suddenly shattered by a strange noise. I woke up with a start, my eyes burning and my heart hammering in my chest. The grandfather clock on the wall, an antique that had been in my family for generations, continued its steady ticking, the hands showing it was almost 3 in the morning. Outside, the darkness was thick. Only the pale light of the moon slipped through the crack in the curtain, painting stripes of icy silver on the wooden floor. I stayed still, trying to listen, but that dry, scratching sound kept coming from the garden, as if someone was digging into the earth with something sharp. On this remote farm, out in the heart of the Midwest, a strange noise at this hour is never a good sign. The dogs outside suddenly started barking short, sharp, alert barks, as if they too sensed that something was wrong. My heart clenched, and a chill ran down my spine. I've lived 66 years and I've seen everything on this land, from tornadoes that ripped the roofs off to cattle thieves in the dead of night. But I had never felt as uneasy as I did now, as if an invisible hand were tightening around my throat. I quickly threw on my old wool cardigan, the one my mother knitted for me before she passed away, and tiptoed to the window. With my bare feet trembling on the cold wood, I pulled the curtain back, just enough to leave a sliver of a gap, just enough to see without being seen. Under the moonlight, a silhouette appeared, blurry in the night's mist. I held my breath, straining my eyes to recognize her. It was Clara, my daughter-in-law. She was standing there, alone, near the old wooden fence at the edge of the garden. In one hand, she held a flashlight, its weak beam darting back and forth across the ground. In the other, she clutched a spade, which she drove forcefully into the soft earth with firm movements, as if she were used to it. At her feet, a black duffel bag lay on the ground, bulging in a strange way, as if it held something heavy and hard inside. I saw it, and I felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest. What was Clara doing out there, at this time of the morning? Why was she digging, and what was in that bag that made her sneak around? I saw her glance back at the house, her shoulders tense, like a wild animal afraid of being discovered. Every time the flashlight beam passed over her face, I could see the sweat glinting on her temple, even though the night was cold enough to chill you to the bone. She began to dig faster, with rushed, almost desperate movements. When the hole was deep enough, Clara knelt down. She quickly threw the black duffel bag inside and started shoveling dirt back over it. Her shoveling had a steady rhythm, but I could hear her ragged breathing in the silence of the night. I, behind the curtain, was frozen stiff, my chest aching from holding my breath for so long. I wanted to scream at her, to run out and ask her what she was doing, but my feet seemed nailed to the floor. Something in the way Clara moved, her coldness, her determination, scared me. This was not the sweet daughter-in-law I knew, the one who laughed with joy when she was pregnant with Lily, the one who sat with me in the kitchen to learn how to make the family's pot roast. When she finished filling the hole, Clara even carefully stomped on the fresh dirt, as if to erase any trace. She grabbed a handful of dry grass and scattered it over the top, camouflaging it perfectly. Then, as if nothing had happened, she turned off the flashlight, pulled the hood of her sweatshirt over her head, and walked silently back to the house. Under the pale moon, her shadow looked like that of a ghost, gliding smoothly, but leaving behind a fear in me that I couldn't name. I waited. I waited until I heard the door to her room close softly, until the sound of the deadbolt echoed in the darkness. Only then did I dare to let out my breath. But my breath came out shaky, as if I were the one who had just done something wrong. I couldn't stay in bed any longer. The image of Clara digging the hole, that strangely bulging black duffel bag, kept replaying in my mind. I had to know. I had to know what she had buried. I crept out into the yard, my bare feet treading on the icy night dew. With trembling hands, I grabbed the small spade that Samuel, my son, always used for the garden. I looked for the exact spot, where the earth was freshly moved, where Clara had been standing. The soil was still damp, soft, easy to dig, But with every scoop I took, my heart beat faster, like a war drum. I was scared of what I would find, but I couldn't stop. I needed the truth, no matter how terrible it was. After a few layers of dirt, the tip of the spade hit something hard. I knelt down and used my hands to dig. My fingernails dug into the cold earth. I pulled out the black duffel bag, my heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My trembling hands unzipped it, and then I froze. Inside the bag was a kitchen knife, its steel blade stained with something thick, dark red, that shone in the moonlight. Next to the knife, a shirt, one of those work shirts that Samuel wore, was covered in horrible dark red stains. The iron smell of blood hit me all at once, and my stomach turned. My head was spinning, as if the whole world was collapsing. The air caught in my throat, and I fell to my knees on the damp, cold earth. Everything went blurry, and the darkness swallowed me. When I woke up, the dew had already soaked my cardigan. It was still dark. Luckily, no one had seen me lying there, passed out next to that dreadful hole. Shaking, I tried to get up on all fours. My hands, still covered in dirt, quickly put the knife and shirt back in the bag, and I covered the hole again just as it was. I didn't want Clara to know I had seen anything. Not now. I needed time to think, to understand what was happening. But as I shoveled the dirt, each scoop was like a knife twisting in my heart. I walked back to my room, stumbling, my feet as heavy as lead. I collapsed onto the bed, my whole body ice cold, as if my blood had stopped flowing. A horrible thought entered my head, as sharp as the knife I had just seen. That night, Samuel, my son, had not come home. He always came home, no matter how late it was. He would never leave me and Lily, my granddaughter, without letting us know. But that night, the house was terrifyingly silent. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock and my heart, beating as if it wanted to burst. The next morning, the first rays of sun slipped through the cracks of the wooden door, drawing faint lines of light on the kitchen floor. I was standing there, trying to hold back the fear churning inside me, while my trembling hands stirred the pot of oatmeal on the stove. The smell of oats, which on other days brought me peace, now couldn't shake the chill that clung to my body. On the table, there was only a cup of cold coffee, the old ceramic mug that Samuel used every morning. Clara had gotten up very early, earlier than me, which she almost never did. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the sink, where Clara was washing them meticulously. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from trembling, from breaking. "And Samuel, dear, did he not come home to sleep last night?" Clara didn't turn around. Her back went stiff, and her hands paused for a moment before continuing to scrub. Her voice sounded flat, as if rehearsed. "We had a fight, Mom. He got angry and left." Her words were soft, but they felt false, as if she were reading from a script. I stood there, feeling as if a stone were crushing my chest. A fight? Samuel wasn't one to get angry easily. He wasn't one to leave the house in the middle of the night without a word. My son, no matter how angry he was, would always call me, or at least leave me a note. I swallowed hard, trying to make my voice sound calm, more like a curious mother than a suspicious one. "And what did you fight about, Clara? Was it that bad?" I moved closer, pretending to grab a cloth to wipe the table, but my eyes never left her back. Clara stopped washing the dishes, but still didn't turn around. "It was just little things, Mom," she replied, in the same flat voice, as if trying to dismiss my question. "It's not worth worrying about." And she continued washing, faster now, as if wanting to end the conversation. I remained silent, feeling as if an invisible wall had gone up between us. The Clara from before, the daughter-in-law who used to sit beside me and tell me about her hometown in Ohio, the one who would laugh out loud when I taught her how to make tamales, now seemed like a stranger. I left the kitchen, walking slowly, but inside I was a storm. I was afraid that if I stayed another second, I wouldn't be able to contain myself. I would scream at her. I would ask her about the black duffel bag, about the knife, about the red stains. But I couldn't. Not yet. If she knew that I had seen, that I was suspicious, I wasn't sure what would happen. I passed by Samuel and Clara's room. The door was ajar. I pushed the door gently and went in. The old queen-sized bed, where they both slept, now only had one side indented, with the blanket folded neatly. Samuel's side was cold, with no sign that he had slept there last night. On the nightstand, Samuel's phone, that thing he was never without, was also missing. My stomach twisted into a knot. I remembered the nights when Samuel was a child, when he had a high fever, and I would sit by his bed, holding his hand until he fell asleep peacefully. And now, I was here, in my own son's room, feeling as if he had vanished from my life. I went out to the yard, seeking some air to breathe. The morning sun shone on the garden, right on the spot where, just hours before, I had unearthed Clara's horrible secret. A few chickens were scratching around, loitering right over last night's hole. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly shooed them away, afraid Clara might notice. I looked around, making sure no one was watching me, and then walked towards the barn. Everything was quiet, but the manger was empty. Samuel was always the one to feed the cows every morning. He never missed it. His absence was a painful reminder, stabbing deep into my heart. I went to the well to draw water, as always, but my hands were shaking so much I couldn't keep my balance. The bucket tipped and water spilled all over the yard, soaking my old work boots. I stood there, watching the puddle spread, feeling completely useless. Just then, Clara came out, a grocery bag hanging from her shoulder. She saw the puddle at my feet, frowned slightly, and said in a cold voice, "Be careful, Mom. Don't want you to fall." And without waiting for a reply, she continued, "I have to go to the market to buy a few things." And she left in a hurry, with quick steps as if she were running away. I watched her walk away, my heart in a knot. Clara wasn't just avoiding me. She was hiding something, and I knew it had to do with Samuel. I sank onto the front step, my face in my hands, trying to hold back the tears that wanted to escape. Just then, Kevin, the mailman, stopped his truck in front of the gate. He smiled, with his carefree voice. "Is Mr. Samuel not around today, ma'am?" "He's always out for the mail at this time." That innocent question was like a stab to the heart. I sidestepped the question, paid him quickly, and said with a trembling voice, "Oh, he had to run an errand today." Kevin nodded and drove off, but I stood there, feeling as if my world was crashing down. I went back to Samuel's room, as if that room could give me an answer. His closet was the same, with his shirts folded neatly, but I noticed that several of the work shirts he used on the farm were missing. On his desk, a pile of papers with half-finished notes caught my eye. Samuel's handwriting rushed, full of crossouts. I picked them up, trembling, and read the scattered words. "I can't take it anymore. Divorce. Custody of Lily." Those words were like knives straight to my heart. I hugged the papers to my chest, my legs went weak, and I had to grab onto the desk to keep from falling. Samuel, my son, had been thinking about getting a divorce. The fight Clara had talked about wasn't just little things. It was a deep crack, a secret that I, his mother, had no idea about. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. Lying in the old wooden bed, I stared at the ceiling, where slivers of moonlight seeped through the roof tiles. The image of the black duffel bag, the knife with the horrible red stains, and Samuel's scattered words about divorce spun in my head, like a relentless whirlpool. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that Clara, the daughter-in-law I had come to love like a daughter, couldn't have done something so terrible. But my heart, a mother's heart, kept screaming at me that something was very wrong. I hugged my chest, trying to shake off the feeling of suffocation, but it clung to me, like the chill of the dew seeping through my nightgown. And then, sometime after midnight, a loud thud came from Clara's room, as if a wooden chair had been knocked over. The noise cut through the night silence and made me jump, sitting up abruptly. Right after, a piercing scream tore through the air, filled with panic, mixed with muffled whimpers, as if someone's mouth was being covered. My heart raced, the blood pounding in my ears. I knew instantly it was Clara's voice. What was happening to her? Was it a nightmare? Or something worse? I quickly put on my cardigan, my hands shaking so much it almost fell to the floor. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt the cold wood on my bare feet, but that chill was nothing compared to the fear gripping my heart. The door to Clara's room was ajar. A line of yellow light from a bedside lamp escaped onto the floor, drawing a thin line. I stopped, pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door, and tried to listen. I heard Clara's ragged breathing, mixed with words she mumbled in her sleep, Don't make me. If I didn't, you would have taken everything. No, please, no. Her voice trembled, but it was full of desperation, as if she were pleading with an invisible ghost. Every word she said was like a razor in my heart. Take everything. What? And who was she referring to with, please, no? I thought of Samuel, of my son's absence, and a terror washed over me. Could these words be connected to the black duffel bag I dug up last night? My trembling hand rested on the door, and I pushed it open a little. Inside, the dim light of the lamp illuminated Clara, curled up in a ball on the bed, sweat soaking her long dark hair. Her hands flailed in the air, as if trying to fend off an unseen enemy. The glass of water on the nightstand had fallen, and the water was running in a small puddle across the wooden floor, glistening in the faint light. Suddenly, Clara shot up, her eyes wide open, staring at the empty wall in front of her. Then she let out another scream, sharp, full of fear, as if she had just seen something horrifying. That scream startled me. I almost dropped my cardigan. I couldn't stay outside any longer. I went in and put a hand on her shoulder, shaking her gently. Clara, what's wrong? It's okay, dear. She jumped and turned to look at me abruptly. For a second, her eyes were empty, as if she didn't recognize me. Then she blinked and stammered. It was just a nightmare, Mom. Her voice was shaking, but I saw the panic in her eyes. She quickly gathered the sweat-soaked sheet and stuffed it into the laundry basket in the corner, with rapid movements, as if trying to hide something. I stood there, trying to look calm, but my eyes unintentionally drifted to the sleeve of her white nightgown. A blurry, brown stain, like mud, was on her wrist. My heart sank. Could it be dirt from last night's hole? Or just a random stain? I wanted to ask her. I wanted to scream at her, but I knew that if I did, I would put her on alert. Clara tried to force a smile and walked quickly to the table, picking up the cell phone that had fallen under the bed. She quickly put it in the pocket of her robe, as if she was afraid I would see something on the screen. Mom, you should go get some rest, she said, trying to make her voice sound normal, but I heard the tension in every word. I'm fine. It was just a silly dream. I nodded without saying anything, because I knew I wouldn't get anything out of her by staying. I left in silence, but just as I was closing the door, I heard the sound of the deadbolt. Clara had locked it, as if she was afraid I would come back. That sound, small but sharp, was like a confirmation that she was hiding something from me. I went back to my room, but Clara's scream kept echoing in my head, like a half-confession. I sat on the bed, hugging my chest, trying to breathe deeply to calm down. But how could I calm down? The scattered pieces started to come together in my mind. The knife, the stained shirt, Samuel's notes about the divorce, and now, Clara's nightmare. Everything seemed to be leading me to a truth I didn't dare to face. At sunset the next day, the Midwestern sky was painted a fiery orange, as if the whole world were trying to comfort me with a little warmth amidst the storm raging inside me. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of beans, trying to let the familiar smell of home-cooked food soothe the fear that was eating away at me. But every time I lifted the pot, my hands trembled, as if the horrible secret from the garden still weighed on my fingers. Clara called on the phone while I was chopping an onion. Her voice sounded rushed and dry. You and Lily go ahead and have dinner, Mom. I have an errand to run in town. I'll probably be late. I just said yes, but inside, everything was in turmoil. Again, Clara was leaving without a clear explanation. I looked out the window where the sun was setting and wondered where she was going, with whom, and if it had anything to do with Samuel's absence. I set the table, a simple dinner of pinto beans, tortillas, and a plate of sliced tomatoes. The yellow light from the lamp hanging from the ceiling illuminated the table, stretching my shadow and Lily's across the old wooden wall. Lily, my 6-year-old granddaughter, was sitting across from me, her little eyes shining like two marbles, eating her soup with a heart-wrenching innocence. Seeing her comforted me, but at the same time, my heart ached. She was the only light in these dark days, but I couldn't help but fear that she too was being dragged into the whirlwind of secrets Clara was weaving. I served Lily more beans, trying to make my voice sound gentle, like a casual question. Who knows what your mommy is so busy with lately that she's out so much, sweetie? I smiled at her, but it must have been a forced smile because my lips felt stiff. Lily looked up, her mouth still stained with soup, and answered with complete naturalness. "Maybe she went with the man from the other day again, Grandma." Her words, light as the wind, were like a thunderclap on a clear day for me. The spoon froze in midair. I almost dropped the plate of beans. I tried to stay calm, took a deep breath, and asked again with a trembling voice, "What man, my love?" Lily nodded, stirring her spoon with her little hands as if telling a fun story. "A few days ago, my mommy took me for a walk with a man I didn't know. He was really tall and smelled really nice, like cologne, and he gave me candy, Grandma, really yummy candy. He said he wanted to be my dad, but I told him no, that I only like my daddy Samuel." The little girl smiled from ear to ear, as if telling the funniest thing in the world. But I felt a bitter lump in my throat, as if a gulp of ice-cold water had been poured down my insides. A strange man? Saying he wanted to be Lily's dad? My granddaughter's innocent words were like a razor blade that cut deep into my heart. I looked at Lily's pure smile, and my heart ached like never before. The little girl didn't know that her words had just shattered the little act Clara had put on. I wanted to hug her tight. I wanted to scream that no one could replace Samuel, but I could only stroke her head, trying to hide my trembling hand. "Oh, really?" I said with a faint little voice. "And does your mom go out with that man often?" Lily nodded, still oblivious. "Several times now, Grandma. Mommy told me not to tell Daddy, because he would get mad. But I can tell you, right, Grandma?" She looked up at me, her round eyes full of trust. I nodded, but inside I wanted to burst into tears. Lily, my little granddaughter, was caught in a secret she didn't understand. And I, her grandmother, felt helpless, not knowing what to do to protect her. Just then, there was a knock at the door. I jumped, quickly wiped my hands on my apron, and went to open it. It was Mrs. Gable, the kind neighbor, with a basket of eggs, some still with feathers stuck to them. She smiled kindly, but her eyes were full of concern. "Brought you some eggs, neighbor, freshly laid this morning." Then she leaned in close to my ear and whispered, as if afraid someone might hear her, "Last night I saw your Clara standing at the gate with a guy I don't know. And he had a car, you know. It wasn't the boy Samuel's truck. It seemed very strange to me. That's why I wanted to tell you, Mrs." Gable's words were like an icy wind that made me shiver. I gripped the basket of eggs tightly, feeling a chill run down my entire back. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. It was probably just a friend, nothing more. But both she and I knew that wasn't the truth. Mrs. Gable had barely left when Clara arrived. I heard the shuffling of her boots in the yard, and then the door opened. She came in, carrying a bag of vegetables, her face a bit tired but trying to force a smile. Seeing me standing there, she quickly came inside, saying in a sociable voice, "Thank you, Mrs. Gable. You're always so kind." But when Mrs. Gable was gone, I caught Clara's gaze, cold as ice, that she shot at me for an instant before turning to put the things away. That look gave me a chill, as if she were sizing me up, trying to guess how much I knew. Lily, as innocent as a little bird, ran to her mother, shouting happily, "Mommy, I already told Grandma about the man who's going to be my new daddy." Clara froze. The bag of vegetables fell from her hands with a thud, and some tomatoes rolled all over the floor. She quickly bent down to pick them up, but I saw her hands were shaking, and her face filled with panic. "Mom, Mom!" She turned to me, stammering. "He's just an old friend. He's a big joker. I'm sure the girl misunderstood him." She laughed, but her laugh was forced. She couldn't hide the tension in her eyes. "Lily, don't you go around saying things like that anymore. You hear me," she told the girl in a harsher tone than usual. Lily blinked, confused, and then said in a small voice, "Yes, Mommy, I'm sorry." The air in the kitchen became heavy, as if the whole room were holding its breath. I stood there, still holding the basket of eggs, trying to seem calm, but inside, everything was crumbling. Lily's innocent words, Mrs. Gable's whisper, Clara's cold gaze, they were all pieces that were slowly forming a horrifying picture. I was sure that what Lily said was not a child's fantasy. There was a strange man, one that Clara didn't want me or Samuel to know existed. And if this man really existed, did he have anything to do with the knife, the shirt, and my son's disappearance? The next afternoon, while I was sweeping the yard, I heard the shuffle of Mrs. Gable's, my good neighbor's, shoes. She came through the gate, a small plate in her hand, and said cheerfully, "Neighbor, can I borrow a little bit of sugar? I'm all out at home." I nodded, trying to smile. But when I went into the kitchen for the sugar, Mrs. Gable pulled me aside, leading me to a hidden corner near the fence. She lowered her voice and whispered, full of concern, "Listen, last night I saw your Clara at the gate again with a strange guy. They were arguing about something really intense. They were talking so loud I could hear them from my house. Then the guy put her in a car, one of those shiny cars, and took her away. It wasn't Samuel's truck, I'm sure of that." Mrs. Gable's words were like a punch to the gut. I gripped the broom handle so tightly my knuckles turned white. I tried to keep my voice steady. And did you get a good look at the guy's face, neighbor?" Mrs. Gable shook her head, looking apologetic. "It was too dark. I only saw his silhouette." "But listen to me, neighbor, this isn't normal. You be very careful." I nodded. I thanked her, but when Mrs. Gable left, I had to hold onto the fence to keep from falling. A strange guy, arguing with Clara, and a car. Those details were like puzzle pieces that were slowly fitting together, creating a picture I didn't dare to look at. I thought about what Lily had told me about the new dad, and a new fear, sharp as the knife I had unearthed, took hold of me. That night, I prepared dinner with a heavy heart. Lily was playing in the yard, her clear laughter echoing all around, but it couldn't calm the storm inside me. Clara arrived late, walking into the kitchen with a distracted look on her face and her eyes glued to her cell phone. She sat at the table but didn't even touch the plate of food I had served her. Instead, she was constantly texting, and a small smile played on her lips, as if she were talking to someone who made her happy. Seeing that smile filled me with a rage that rose up inside me. But I held it in, biting my lip to keep from blurting out the questions that were burning in my mind. Lily, innocent as ever, looked up from her plate of beans and asked in her clear little voice, "Mommy, is Daddy coming home for dinner tonight? Is he coming?" The girl's innocent question was like a stone in a still pond. Clara jumped. The cell phone almost fell from her hand. She shot me a look, sharp as a razor for an instant, before turning to Lily and saying curtly, "Eat your food. You ask too many questions." Her voice was harsher than usual, and Lily blinked, pressing her lips together, not daring to say more. I continued to clear the plates in silence. But inside, the sea was rough. Clara was not only hiding something from me, she was afraid of being discovered. Lily's question, though innocent, seemed to have touched a nerve she wanted to hide. After dinner, I went out to the backyard to get some water, looking for some air to breathe. Night fell, covering the farm in its darkness, and only the pale light of the moon and the chirping of the crickets could be heard. As I passed by Clara's room, I saw a sliver of light coming from under the door. I stopped, unintentionally, but I managed to hear her whispers. Clara's voice was low, almost inaudible, but each word hit me like a hammer blow. "You don't worry, no one suspects anything. Don't call me anymore. It's too dangerous." I froze, my heart pounding a mile a minute, feeling as if my blood had turned to ice. Who was she talking to? And what was this about being dangerous? I wanted to push the door open and go in. I wanted to scream at her and ask what she was hiding, but my feet seemed nailed to the floor. I knew that if I acted rashly, I could put myself and Lily in danger. I returned to my room in silence and closed the door, but sleep did not come. Lying in bed, tossing and turning, the scattered images of the past few days began to appear, fitting together in a perfect and horrifying way. The knife and the shirt stained with that horrible red, buried in the garden. Clara's scream in her nightmare, like a confession. Lily's innocent story about the new dad. And now, Mrs. Gable's gossip about the strange guy, along with Clara's secret phone call. They were all pieces that led me to a truth I didn't want to believe. It was very possible that Samuel, my son, had been killed, and that the culprit was none other than Clara. A few days later, I forced myself to go to the town market, as always, to buy a few things for Lily. I couldn't let myself fall apart. I couldn't let the girl see her grandmother weak. Every step I took away from the farm felt heavy, as if I were carrying a stone on my back. The horrible images, the knife with the gruesome red stain, the stained shirt, Clara's scream in her nightmare, and Lily's innocent story about the new dad. They stuck to me, like shadows that wouldn't leave me in peace. I clutched the rosary I carried in my blouse pocket, praying quietly for the strength to go on. Although inside, all I wanted to do was scream and go out looking for Samuel, my son. The town market was as noisy as ever, with the shouts of the vendors, the haggling of the people, and the smell of freshly made cornbread mixed with that of fresh vegetables. I stood in front of Helen's stall, trying to concentrate on picking tomatoes, but my hands were shaking so much that I dropped one on the ground. Helen laughed, with her cheerful voice. "What's wrong, ma'am? You seem so nervous. What's worrying you?" I just gave her a half smile, not answering why. How could I tell her what was choking my heart? I continued picking vegetables, trying to lose myself in the crowd to forget, even for a minute, the fear that was eating away at me. And then, while I was picking out some potatoes, I heard some nearby vendors gathered together, whispering. The voice of Carmen, the fruit seller, was loud and clear. They say that Mr. Henderson, the other day when he was grazing his cows, found a man all beaten up in the vacant lot by the highway to Omaha. It's a miracle he was still breathing. They already took him to the hospital, but they say it's been 2 days and no one has come to identify him. Poor thing. Those words were like a thunderclap that exploded in my head. The basket fell from my hands with a thud, and the tomatoes and potatoes went rolling everywhere. The vendors turned to look at me, with curiosity, but I paid them no mind. My heart was pounding a mile a minute, the blood was rushing in my ears, and my throat went dry. Trembling, I approached Carmen with a broken voice. "In which vacant lot, you say, ma'am? To what hospital?" Carmen looked at me, and her curiosity turned to pity. "In the vacant lot by the highway to Omaha, ma'am. They took him to the University Hospital in Omaha. They say he's in very serious condition, but no family has come yet. Do you know him?" I didn't answer. I just shook my head, holding back my tears. I left the basket there, left all the vegetables, and almost ran out of the market, stumbling on the cobblestones. I ran to the bus stop, without thinking, just knowing that I had to get there, that I had to see if that man was my Samuel. On the bus to Omaha, I sat curled up in a corner, clutching my rosary so tightly that it left an imprint on my palm. The landscape passed by in a blur through the window, but I saw nothing but Samuel's face. His smile, his warm voice when he called me Mom, and even the scattered words about the divorce I found in his room. My heart sometimes raced, and sometimes it seemed to stop. I had hope, but also a terrible fear. Hope that the injured man was Samuel, that he was still alive. But at the same time, I was afraid to face the truth, afraid that those wounds had to do with the stained knife, with Clara, with the mysterious man Mrs. Gable saw. I prayed quietly, asking the Virgin Mary to give me strength. But inside, I knew that whatever the truth was, it would change everything. The University Hospital of Omaha appeared before me, with its crowded hallways and a strong smell of disinfectant that filled my nose. I almost ran to the reception desk and clung to a young nurse's arm, saying breathlessly, "Excuse me, miss, did you bring in an unidentified male patient a few days ago? One they found badly injured, in a vacant lot?" The nurse looked at me, a little surprised by my desperation, and then checked a logbook. "Yes, there is one, ma'am," she said in a calm voice. "About 30 years old, with several stab wounds. A farmer found him in a vacant lot near Omaha. Are you a relative?" I didn't answer, I just begged her. "Please let me see him. I have to know." The nurse led me down some long corridors. Her shoes echoed at a steady pace, but I could only hear my own heartbeat. The heavy door to the room opened, and the cold white light illuminated everything. On the bed, a thin man was lying, with tight white bandages around his chest, breathing with difficulty through an oxygen mask. I approached. Each step felt like it weighed a ton, and then I saw his face, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. Samuel. It was my son. His face was pale, his lips dry and chapped. But it was Samuel, the son I gave birth to, that I raised, that I have loved more than my own life. I ran to him. I took his thin hand, and my tears flowed like a river. "Samuel, my son," I said between sobs, my voice broken. As if he sensed I was there, Samuel's eyelids fluttered a little. He opened his eyes slowly. His gaze was clouded, but he still recognized me. A weak word escaped his dry lips. Mom. Just that one word, but it was enough to make me weep uncontrollably. I leaned in, putting my ear to his mouth as my tears fell onto the white sheet. Son, what happened to you? Who did this to you? I tried to keep my voice from trembling, but how? When my whole body was shaking with pain and fear, I needed to know the truth, no matter how horrible it was. Samuel made an effort to swallow. His breathing was ragged, and every word he spoke seemed to cost him all the strength he had left. I found out. Clara was cheating on me. His voice was hoarse, weak, but each word was like a stab to my heart. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I wanted a divorce and that I was going to fight for custody of Lily. She begged me, and then she threatened me. In the end, while we were arguing, she stabbed me with a knife. I fell to the ground. Samuel paused, closing his eyes tightly, as if the memory was too painful to continue. I squeezed his hand. The tears wouldn't stop, soaking my sleeve. Clara, the daughter-in-law I loved, who I treated like a daughter, had stabbed Samuel. I didn't want to believe it, but the image of the stained knife, the shirt in the black duffel bag, appeared so clearly in my mind, confirming my son's words. Samuel took a deep breath, trying to continue, his voice raspy. Clara thought I was dead. She called some guy. I only heard the name Vincent. Between the two of them, they put me in a car and went to dump me in that vacant lot to die. At that moment, I was still conscious. I closed my eyes tight and played dead. Otherwise, they would have finished me off. He stopped, looking at me with eyes full of fear. You and Lily are in danger too. Samuel's words were like an icy wind that made me tremble with terror. I thought of Lily, my little granddaughter with her pure smile, who was at home with Clara. If Clara could do this to Samuel, would she be capable of hurting Lily? That thought made my heart stop. A nurse came in with a tray to change his bandages. I stepped back, but without taking my eyes off Samuel. Underneath the gauze, the long, deep wound on his chest was red and swollen, a cruel reminder of what he had suffered. The nurse worked carefully, but every time Samuel groaned softly in pain, I felt as if the stab was being dealt to me. When the nurse left, Samuel motioned for me to come closer and said in a weak but firm voice, "Mom, you have to be very careful. Under no circumstances let them know I'm alive. I need time to recover, and then we're going to make them pay." His gaze, though cloudy, still had a spark of determination, like a little flame that hadn't gone out. I nodded, quickly wiping away my tears, but inside I made a vow, firm as a rock. "Son, I'm going to protect you and Lily. I won't let them get away with this." I squeezed Samuel's hand, feeling his weak grip as a promise that together we would get through this. A few days after finding Samuel in the hospital, I felt like I was living in a long nightmare, where every moment was heavy and tense. Seeing my son recover little by little, being able to sit up and talk, though still weak, was the only comfort in the midst of the storm in my soul. But I knew we couldn't just stop at having found Samuel. The truth of what Clara and that man named Vincent had done had to come to light. I couldn't let them continue living as if nothing had happened. I couldn't let them threaten Samuel's and Lily's lives for another day. That morning, I helped Samuel walk to the county sheriff's office. His arm trembled as he leaned on me, but his gaze was firm, like that little flame I used to see in him as a child when he was determined to do something no matter how difficult it was. I pushed open the old wooden door of the station, and the smell of old papers and burnt coffee filled my nose. Detective Miller, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, looked up from his desk and glanced at us with indifference. "How can I help you?" he asked, in a monotonous voice, as if we were just another unimportant case of the day. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "This isn't just anything," I said, pointing to Samuel, who was sitting in a chair, his shirt revealing a piece of the white bandage on his chest. "They almost killed my son. This isn't a husband and wife squabble. It's attempted murder." My voice came out louder than I expected, as if all the pain and fear of the past few days had exploded into words. Detective Miller frowned. His gaze shifted from me to Samuel, but still with some doubt. "I understand you two fought often," he said, flipping through some papers on his desk. It was probably a family dispute, ma'am. It can't be that serious. I slammed my hand on the desk. I couldn't hold back anymore. Not that serious? Look at my son. I pointed to the wound on Samuel's chest, my voice trembling with rage and pain. My daughter-in-law stabbed him and went to dump him in a vacant lot to die. Is that what you call a family dispute? Samuel, though weak, lifted his head. His gaze cloudy but full of determination. He told the horrible story, and every word broke my heart all over again. Clara, my wife, stabbed me after I told her I wanted a divorce and custody of my daughter. She called a man named Vincent, and between the two of them, they took me to the vacant lot, thinking I was already dead. If I hadn't pretended to be unconscious, I wouldn't be here right now, I added, my voice trembling but firm. And I, with my own eyes, saw Clara bury the knife and a shirt covered in a gruesome red stain in the garden of the house. That's the weapon, I'm sure of it. Detective Miller stopped flipping through the papers, and his expression turned serious. He nodded slowly, as if he finally understood that this wasn't just some story. All right, he said in a graver voice. We'll investigate. I'll send a team of plainclothes officers to your farm today to verify. He signaled to a young officer nearby, and I saw them start to talk among themselves, in low but urgent tones. They took us to a small waiting room, with stained walls and the smell of old cigarettes. Time passed slowly, each minute seeming like an hour. I sat next to Samuel, holding his hand, feeling his weak grip as a reminder that he was alive, that he was here with me. But inside, I couldn't stop worrying. What would happen if Clara discovered that Samuel was alive? Would she do something to Lily to hide her crime? I thought of my little granddaughter, who was at home with Clara, and my heart clenched. Son, I whispered, I won't let anyone hurt you or Lily. Samuel nodded, his face pale but with a spark of hope in his eyes. I know, Mom, he said, his voice hoarse. I trust you. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, a young officer ran into the waiting room, a sealed evidence bag in his hand. Inside, I saw the kitchen knife and the shirt with the gruesome red stain, the same things I had unearthed in the garden that night. My heart pounded when the officer informed Detective Miller. Preliminary results show that the only print on the knife matches that of Clara Vargas. The stain on the shirt is being analyzed, but it appears to match Mr. Samuel's blood type. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, as if part of the burden I had been carrying was gone. But at the same time, the pain returned, because now I was sure that Clara, the daughter-in-law I had loved, was the one who had tried to kill my son. Detective Miller stood up, his face serious. There is sufficient evidence to proceed with the arrest and investigation, he said, in a firm voice. Just then, the radio on his desk crackled, and a detective's voice came through, rushed. The target, Clara, has just left the farm. She's meeting a man at a diner on the highway. It seems she noticed our presence, and they're preparing to flee in a car. I heard it and felt my heart stop. Was Clara trying to escape? With this Vincent guy? I clutched the rosary in my pocket, praying they would catch them before they disappeared. Miller gave the order immediately, his voice sharp. Surround them and arrest them both now. Don't let them get away. I remained silent, nervously fiddling with the beads of my rosary, each one like a prayer for justice. Samuel closed his eyes. His pale face relaxed a little. He whispered, his voice weak but full of determination. Finally, it's about time, Mom. I squeezed my son's hand, feeling the faint warmth coming from it, and I knew that the truth, however painful, was finally coming to light. Less than 15 minutes later, the radio crackled again. The detective's voice was excited. We have detained Clara Vargas and the man accompanying her. We suspect he is Vincent Salazar. Both are being transported to the station. I let out a breath, feeling my whole body go limp with relief. The morning of the trial, I woke up while it was still dark, my heart heavy as if I were carrying a stone. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my gray hair and the deep wrinkles on my face, and wondered how I was going to face this day. The trial in the county courthouse was not only the place where the truth would be known, but also where I would have to face Clara, who was my daughter-in-law, the one who almost took my son's life. I clutched my rosary, praying for strength, not just for myself, but for Samuel and Lily, the people I loved most. Samuel and I arrived at the courthouse early. He, though better, still needed a cane to walk, and the wound in his chest made him stoop a little with each step. Seeing my son, who used to be as strong as a cornfield, now so weak and tired, broke my soul. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters already surrounded us. The camera flashes went off incessantly, as if they wanted to devour us. I took Samuel's hand and whispered, "Son, we're going to get through this. Justice is on our side." Samuel nodded, his gaze firm, though his face was still pale. "I trust you, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. When the patrol car carrying Clara and Vincent arrived, I felt my whole body tremble. They got out, handcuffed, with their heads down, but I still caught a glimpse of Clara's nervous gaze, as if she were looking for a way to escape. Vincent, that man I had never seen before, was tall and looked arrogant, but his eyes couldn't hide his worry either. I squeezed Samuel's hand, trying to hold back my tears. These were the ones who almost took my son from me, who destroyed my family. I wanted to scream at them, to run up and confront them, but I knew that today the truth would speak for me. In the courtroom, the silence was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. The old wooden benches were filled with people, from witnesses to curious townspeople. I sat next to Samuel, still holding his hand, feeling his weak grip as if he were encouraging me. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a strong voice, stood up to present the case. He laid before the judge the undeniable evidence, the kitchen knife with Clara's fingerprints, the shirt with the gruesome red stain unearthed from the garden, and the lab report confirming that the red liquid on the shirt was Samuel's. With each piece of evidence, I felt my heart clench, as if I were reliving that horrible night when I dug up the black duffel bag. Mr. Henderson, the farmer who found Samuel, stood up to testify. His voice trembled a little, but it was clear. I was grazing my cows when I saw a man lying unconscious in the middle of the vacant lot. He had blood all over him. I thought he was already dead. I called for help, and we took him to the hospital immediately. If I had arrived any later, he surely wouldn't have made it. Mr. Henderson's words were like a knife, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. I looked at Samuel and saw that he closed his eyes, his face tense, as if trying to endure the pain of hearing that story again. Then it was Samuel's turn. He stood up, leaning on his cane, his voice still trembling but full of decision. It was my wife, Clara Vargas, who stabbed me after I told her I wanted a divorce and custody of my daughter. She called her lover, Vincent Salazar, to help her dump me in the vacant lot, thinking I was already dead. Samuel's voice echoed in the courtroom, louder than I expected, as if he had gathered all his strength to tell the truth. I clutched my rosary as tears streamed down my face in silence. My son, though he almost lost his life, was there, facing those who betrayed him. Suddenly, Clara burst into tears, falling to her knees before the judge. "It's not true," she cried, her voice broken with panic. "He was the one who forced me. That day I had been drinking after a fight with my husband, and what shouldn't have happened, happened. It was supposed to end there. But Vincent threatened me. He said if I didn't keep seeing him, he would tell everyone." She pointed at Vincent, her face bathed in tears. But I only saw falsehood in every one of them. I remembered her cold gaze when I asked about Samuel, her whispers in the night, and my heart ached to think that she was once part of my family. Vincent jumped up, slamming the table, his face red with rage. "Liar! She was the one who called me, begging me to help her hide her crime. I only did what she asked. I didn't stab anyone." His voice was loud, full of anger but also fear. The whole courtroom erupted. The murmurs of the people were like the crashing of waves. I just sat there, listening to them blame each other, and I felt a deep sadness. They had not only betrayed Samuel, but also the trust of me, of Lily, of this whole family. The prosecutor continued to present evidence. Mrs. Gable's testimony, telling of the time she saw Clara with the strange man at the gate. The medical report confirming that the stab wounds on Samuel's body were not an accident, but an intentional act. Each piece of evidence was like another piece, completing the puzzle of Clara and Vincent's crime. Clara lowered her head, her hands trembling, unable to say anything more. Vincent kept trying to deny his guilt, but the sweat running down his forehead betrayed him. I looked at them, these people who were once part of our lives, now standing before the law, and I felt a mixture of pain and relief. Pain for the betrayal, relief because the truth was finally coming to light. Finally, the judge, a woman with a serious face, stood up to deliver the sentence. Her voice was clear and firm. Clara Vargas, guilty of attempted homicide, is sentenced to 15 years in prison. Vincent Salazar, accomplice in the concealment of a crime and aiding in its commission, is sentenced to 7 years in prison. The rap of the gavel echoed, like the final period on a long nightmare. The entire courtroom fell silent. The only sounds were Clara's sobs and the insults Vincent muttered. As they were being led away, Clara turned to look at Samuel and me. Her gaze was no longer one of remorse, but of a hatred that chilled the blood, as if she still couldn't accept the consequences of her actions. I squeezed Samuel's hand, giving him strength, and I felt his weak squeeze back. "Mom," Samuel whispered, his voice hoarse, "it's finally over." I nodded, tears streaming down my face, but this time they were tears of liberation. I knew that, in the end, justice had been served. A few months after the trial, peace slowly returned to our farm. The cornfields continued to grow strong under the golden Midwestern sun, as if they had never seen such dark days. Every morning, when the sun rose, I would stand in the yard, taking a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling life slowly return. But inside, I knew that the scars, not just the one on Samuel's chest, but also those on my heart and Lily's, would never completely fade. They were part of us, a reminder of what we had overcome and the strength we had found in each other. Samuel was almost fully recovered. The long scar on his chest, reddish and puckered, was the mark of a horrible night. But he didn't let that scar define him. I would watch him, now that he could handle a hoe to work in the garden, fix the fence, or carry the heavy sacks of corn, and my heart would fill with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Mom," he said to me one afternoon, as we were sitting in the kitchen, "I don't want Lily to grow up in fear. I want her to see her father strong, to know that we can overcome anything." I nodded, and tears silently escaped, but this time they were tears of hope. Lily, my little granddaughter, started running and playing in the yard again. Her clear laughter sounded like silver bells, chasing away the ghosts of the past. In the first few days after the trial, she would often cuddle up next to me, and with her round eyes, she would ask, "Where did my mommy go, Grandma? Is the new daddy coming back?" Every question was like a knife, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. I would just hug her tight and whisper, "Your mommy had to go far away for a while, my love, but your grandma and your daddy will always be here with you." Little by little, Lily stopped asking about her mom or the new dad. Maybe she was too young to understand everything, but I knew that, deep down, she too was trying to heal in her own childlike way. I continued to wake up early every day, as has been my habit for years. I would prepare a pot of hot oatmeal, and the smell would spread through the kitchen, mixing with the crowing of the roosters and the sound of the wind through the fields. Those familiar sounds of farm life, though simple, were like medicine for my soul. I would stand by the stove, stirring the oatmeal, and think about the months that had passed, about the sleepless nights filled with fear, about the hours in the hospital when I held Samuel's hand, praying for him to wake up. Now, when I looked out at the yard and saw Samuel and Lily playing together, I felt a bit of peace return, though I knew the road ahead still had its difficulties. Samuel decided to reopen the family's small woodworking business, a dream he had told me about since he was young. One night, sitting on the porch, he looked at me with shining eyes. "I want Lily to grow up in a safe place, one she can be proud of, Mom. I want her to know that her dad and her grandma will always be there for her. The business isn't just about making money, it's about keeping our traditions alive. So she has something to remember her family by." I smiled and put my hand on his shoulder. "Son, I know you'll succeed, and I will always be here, with you and Lily." Samuel's words were like a promise, not just to Lily, but to me as well, that we were going to rebuild everything from the ashes. Every now and then, Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable would visit, bringing us something from their garden, a basket of ripe tomatoes or some soft, fragrant avocados. Once, while Mr. Henderson was having coffee with us, he clapped Samuel on the shoulder and smiled kindly. "You were given a second chance at life, Samuel. Cherish it, and cherish the people who love you. Samuel nodded, with a look of gratitude. "I'll never forget what you did for me, Mr. Henderson," he said in his deep voice. "If it weren't for you, I might not be here now." Seeing them, I felt my heart warm, as if the kindness of people still existed, in the midst of so much pain and loss. Every weekend, I would take Lily to the small-town church. She would hold my hand and skip along, telling me about her games at school. In the church, under the dim light of the candles, I would kneel and light a candle for Samuel, one for Lily, and one for the lost soul of Clara. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her completely, but I know that forgiveness, however difficult, is the only way my family and I can move forward. I prayed for Clara, not because she deserved it, but because I didn't want my heart to live imprisoned by resentment. I wanted Lily to grow up in a home filled with love, not bitterness. At night, I often sit on the porch, watching the distant lights of Omaha. The moon illuminates the cornfield, making it shine like jewels. I think about what we lost: trust, peace, and a part of our family, but I also think about what we kept: Samuel, Lily, and the love we have for each other. Lily's laughter comes from inside the house, clear and full of hope, like a song that calms my heart. "Grandma, will you make me corn cakes tomorrow?" she shouts, running to hug me. I laugh and pull her towards me, feeling her warmth. "Of course, my love, I'll make you a whole basketful." I close my eyes, feeling the night wind in my gray hair, with a calm I haven't felt in a long time. Life shook us with horrible things, but now we are learning to heal. I know there will be difficult days, moments when Lily asks about her mom, or nights when Samuel wakes up from a nightmare. But I also know that as long as we have each other, we will get through it all. After everything that happened, I just want to leave a message for everyone. In life, the most dangerous things are not the storms outside, but the lies and betrayals that hide within one's own family. The truth, no matter how cruel, must come to light, because hiding it only makes the wound deeper and drags innocent people into a whirlwind of suffering. I learned that only love, strength, and the desire to protect your loved ones give you the power to overcome the darkest days. Justice may be slow, but in the end, it arrives, and when it does, the important thing is not to let your heart fill with hatred so you can continue to live, to love, and so that children can grow up in the light of truth and not in the shadow of a lie. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of the people involved. We do not tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.